The Positive Pause is a motivational-minded podcast covering topics women want to know about as they journey to and through menopause, focusing on subjects that impact women's health and healthy aging, including what it means to age healthfully. The Positive Pause features experts and influencers from a variety of industries and specialties. The information and opinions expressed on the Positive Pause are not intended to replace the services of trained professionals or to provide specific medical advice. To see the National Menopause Foundation's full medical disclaimer, please visit nationalmenopausefoundation.org.
Welcome to the Positive Pause. I'm Claire Gill, founder of the National Menopause Foundation. Joining me for this episode is Dr. Whitney Roban, sleep expert, author, and founder of Solve Our Sleep. Her mission is to provide the sleep education and support we need to not only survive, but to thrive. Dr. Roban's training and experience as a clinical psychologist paved the way to her success as a leading sleep expert. Dr. Roban is the author of the award-winning Devin and Evan children's book series and the first ever school healthy sleep curriculum. She is also a sought-after presenter and resident sleep expert to corporations, schools, hotels, spas, and wellness companies. She has been featured in national media such as the New York Times, CNN, The Today Show, NBC News, ABC News, Fox News, everybody, Forbes, and Rolling Stone. Thank you so much for being with me today, Dr. Roban.
Thank you for having me.
So I think we've actually had an opportunity to meet each other before, and so I'm so excited to have you on this episode. And I had shared with you previously that until my mid-40s, I would tell everybody that if sleep were an Olympic sport, I would be a gold medalist. I loved sleep. I could do it anywhere, anytime. And now, and really, like I said, starting in my mid-40s, getting 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep seems like just a miracle. And I am so desperate to get back to those times when sleep was just an easy thing for me to do. I'm sure that's true for so many women, thousands of women, tens of thousands of women who are going through this stage of life too. And so let's start by talking about why our sleep habits change as we age, and are there commonalities?
So Claire, I just want to start off by saying you are not alone. If that makes you feel any better. This is all I hear in my professional life, but in my personal life too, we're about the same age. And it's all really anybody talks about is what poor sleep they're getting, women during this menopausal phase. And it's not surprising. It just makes sense because hormones, right? Our hormone are changing. We have a decrease in estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and all of the menopausal symptoms that come along with that will affect our sleep, which is, of course, the number one are the night sweats. And that's probably the biggest complaint. I think like up to 85% of menopausal women experience night sweats will literally wake them up out of their sleep, perspiring. But there's other symptoms too, like the mood changes, the anxiety and depression, right? We always say that sleep and mental health are intertwined. The joint aches, as you know, the osteoporosis, muscle aches, heart palpitations can literally wake you up out of your sleep. So there's so many symptoms that it's all kind of like a perfect storm leading to insomnia. And menopausal women, about 60% of women will report experiencing sleep disturbances or insomnia.
It's so interesting to me. And like you said, I know that, again, like you, in my circle, everyone talks about it as well. So I'm always marveling when I hear that it's only 60%. I'm like, there's 40% of women out there who don't have to deal with it. Oh my God, they're so lucky.
What have they figured out?
They do. And I think it's, that's really important to keep in mind, though, as we do talk within our circles, that it's going to affect some people tremendously. And then other people are going to say, oh no, I don't have that. It's making sure that we give each other grace and give ourselves grace, and that even if you're not experiencing it, believe us that there are a lot of your friends, coworkers, neighbors, everybody that are really, really impacted by this. So I know we have limited time on these episodes. And so I really want to get into Your top 5. What are the things that you think are must-haves or must-dos for building good sleep habits? And then also a little bit about why for each of them.
Sure. So these are very related to just basic sleep hygiene things, right? And this is not just for women. This is for everybody, for your kids, your spouses, significant others. First thing we have to remember is that our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle is 24 hours. And all anybody ever talks about is what you do before bed. And that is really important. But it's your morning routine that's also really important. Get up, immediately get sunshine, fresh air, some stretching. Sunlight is so important to reset our circadian rhythm for the day. So even if you had a bad night of sleep, you need to get up and get out for your body to know, okay, now it's daytime, right? We shouldn't be like laying in a dark room if, you had a poor night of sleep. So that's one thing. And getting fresh air and exercise throughout the day. Something else that people do, of course, is drink a lot of caffeine, especially if you're not sleeping well. And something people don't realize is that it stays in our system a lot longer than we realize, 5 to 7 hours. So you really have to, not that you shouldn't have caffeine at all, but cut it out around lunchtime. So that way it won't affect you falling asleep at night. The other drink that you should be cutting out, unfortunately, is alcohol. Mm. And that is something that I hear a lot, is that people use alcohol as a sleep aid, and it is not a good sleep aid to use. It does actually make you probably fall asleep faster. Yeah. But after your body processes, metabolizes the alcohol, you will wake up with something called a rebound effect. So if you think about those nights that you drank, you probably fall asleep and go home and have a great night of sleep, and it ends up being a shorter night of sleep. Exercising earlier in the day and eating earlier in the day. So your body doesn't have time to have to deal with getting through all the food that you ate, so it won't keep you up at night with like heartburn or indigestion. And you want to get all the cortisol levels low enough so you get the workouts done earlier. So those are kind of like basic things. The nighttime routine, getting to that is really important. Finding things that just relax you. Like my nighttime routine is always a hot bath or shower. I journal during that to get out all of my anxieties, my lists. I'm a to-do list person, so to-do list for the next day. Do some yoga stretches after, some pillow spray, read a relaxing book, listen to some relaxing music, and go to bed. And then the last thing really is your sleep environment, which I don't think people put enough effort on to get it really, quote unquote, like perfect. Your room should be dark, quiet, and cool. So I think we've talked about this, Claire. People always, are amazed when I say this. I sleep with my bedroom at 64 degrees. Now, when I'm home and I work from home, I keep my home at 72 degrees during the day because I'm always cold. But right before I go to bed, I turn it down to 64. And women have told me that it has been life-changing for them. I never wake up hot in the middle of the night because my room is so incredibly cold, and you will sleep better with a colder room. And then also you make sure it's really dark and quiet.
That's okay. There's so many things that you shared in there that I want to kind of go back and touch on. One, I love the cold room. And it's interesting because so many women, particularly as they age too, are so impacted by cold, too. And this, but beyond the hot flashes, we all have those friends who are always cold. So to say to them that you're going to lower the temperature for them to go to sleep is kind of shocking, except they can put blankets on, right? You can do it, but the atmosphere needs to be cold.
Yes.
That's so interesting. And my husband loves this part when I tell him that this is what is necessary, because I kid you not, there were times in our marriage where I could see my breath in the room and I'm like, it's too cold, baby. And he's like, no, just get under. It's warm. It's lovely. And I was like, no, I don't need to see my breath. But that keeping it cool, turns out he was right. So credit to Mike Gill for that one.
And if your spouse doesn't like it cold, then just have them layer up. There's a big trend now. It's called the Scandinavian sleep method. And it's where couples do not share a comforter. You each have your own comforter. So get them a very thick, your spouse's thick comforter, and wear heavy pajamas if the room's too cold. And we all need to really sleep with it cold. But a lot of significant others do like it cold as well.
That makes total sense. And again, it's better than sleeping in separate bedrooms, which is also another conversation for another topic of stuff that people do for quality sleep. And I can totally understand that too, depending on how different the sleep patterns are for the couple moving forward. But I also saw something, it was Scandinavian related, where they opened the windows for the children's rooms right before bed. And then the children go running in and they put like hot water bottles and stuff in the bed. And so, they close the door, open the window, and the kids go driving in. So some cultures have figured this out about that sleep, cooling need for sleep at every age, not just for those of us going through hot flashes and night sweats and stuff.
Exactly.
The other thing I want to touch back on that you were talking about is the daylight and fresh air right away. And I know this is controversial across the board, but like daylight savings. So when you're getting up before dawn, so it's 6 a.m. and I'm up, and that's when I'm getting up to take my daughter and get her ready for school. So there's no daylight yet. Does that matter? Or does it just mean I need to, after sunrise, make sure I get back outside again?
Right. So you get up. First thing is to actually get up out of bed. And I tell people, do not keep your alarm next to your bed. If you're going to sleep with your phone in your room, because I know people tell people not to, but they do anyway, put it across the room so it actually gets you up and out. So not laying in a dark, turn on your lights immediately. So you're get some light in your home. Drink a big glass of water because we get hydrated at night. And something that I like to do in the morning is like a motivation to get out of bed, because if it is dark and cold and it's early and you have to get up early for work or to get your kids to school, have something waiting for you in the kitchen that you love. Like I make my own lattes in the morning, and that's something I really look forward to. And that is my motivation to get up and get out of bed. So have something that you're really going to motivate you to. And the other suggestion is, and of course, no one's going to listen to this either, is don't get right on your phone. Because once you turn on that phone and you start going back on social media, see what you missed, you go down that rabbit hole, and then there you are laying in your bed, and your body does not know that it's time to get up and start secreting the cortisol you need to give yourself the burst of energy to start your day.
It's so interesting, again, just keeping in mind what you're sharing about the entire cycle of our rhythm and not just the sleep portion of it. But I think we do hear a little bit more about that, creating that routine, like you said, start winding down, shut off your phone a little bit before, do something that relaxes you kind of stuff. But we're always missing you could be doing all that right and still be tired. And possibly it's from what you're doing in the morning that's not working
right.
out.
People just want a quick fix. They want to be like a light switch where you just, turn off your light and then your body and brain just turns off and goes to sleep. And that's very hard to do even if you do the right things during the day. But if you're going to bed after maybe a crazy workout, or you had too much food to eat, or you're laying in your bed on social media for 2 hours and then you get frustrated, you can't fall asleep, you're not setting yourself up for a healthy night of sleep. So really prioritizing sleep and doing the things that are relaxing. We all have to learn how to relax our minds and our bodies before sleep. It doesn't just happen as quickly as people want it to, especially if we're not doing the right things throughout the day.
Well, this leads me to my next question, which because I think this is so interesting and so important. I've joked with you that I know all of these things and I do every single one of these wrong. And I heard from a friend recently that they had a sleep coach. And I thought, man, that makes great sense. But can you talk a little bit about what sleep coaches do and how is it different than knowing these habits that we hear about on podcasts or that we read about in articles or books that are telling us to have these habits, kinds of stuff? What is the benefit of a sleep coach?
So I think of a sleep coach, the benefit is not just sleep related. Like think about just like a therapist, right? For any mental health issue. If you read a book, you go online, it might relate to you, but there are things that are not, and that might not help, right? So it's individualized. It's somebody that's going to learn about your issues, your environment, your history, medications you're taking, things you've tried in the past, what's going on in your life. I mean, a lot of behavioral sleep issues have to do with anxiety and depression, right? So having a mental health background as a sleep coach is very helpful because that's a very big part of it. And it's also holding somebody accountable. So I think you read a book and no one's going to come in and check in on you saying, okay, you're actually following this. So it's somebody that weekly is holding you accountable for making the changes that you should. And, I can't speak for every sleep coach, but CBTI is what I practice, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And there are other tenets to it. We need a much longer podcast for that. But it's not just about the sleep hygiene. There are other things, stimulus control and sleep consolidation and cognitive restructuring. There are different tenets to it that are very specific to cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep, or CBTI for insomnia. But the good news is, when I started this, working in the field of sleep, it was 19 years ago. So people used to say to me, you're asleep what? Like, no one talked about sleep.
Yeah.
There weren't many of us that did this. There wasn't social media. You couldn't get this information as readily as you can now. So the good news is now there's almost like no excuse to not get help because it's out there. Whether it's some great, sleep doctors on social media that give amazing information, or it is apps. There's free apps. There's CBTI Coach. That's an app that's free. There are companies that offer sleep coaching that train people to be their sleep coaches that are very low cost. So even for people that don't want to or don't have the ability to spend a lot of money. So there's free ways, there's less expensive things to do. And then there are, of course, books, and then there's social media you could follow. Not that I would really recommend going on TikTok for your advice on sleep and those hacks, but there's definitely a lot of ways now, almost 2 decades later that I've been in the sleep world, that people can go and get sleep help. And that makes me really happy.
Well, I think one is to just talking about the fact that you might need help with sleep. It's something that's supposed to be so natural and easy to do. Why would we need, a coach to do it? And yet it is the foundation of so much of our health and well-being. And I was thinking to myself, the correlation of the personal trainer, right? That's become such a norm for people to get a personal trainer to help them individualize their workout routine for what works for them and doesn't and all that kind of stuff, because everybody's different. So sounds like it's similar with the sleep coach.
That's a great analogy, Claire. Yeah, I agree.
Just being able to prioritize and find out what's happening within our own environment and then do it. And so is it like those other kinds of coaches that we have where there's like a certain number of sessions? Or I totally understand what you're saying about the therapy aspect too, because that is such a big part of what influences our ability to get good night's sleep and stuff. But is it something that people do long term? Is it something that people can do short term or long term? How does that process work?
It's pretty short term, usually around 4 to 6 sessions. But what people don't realize is oftentimes your sleep might get worse before it gets better. Yeah. And that's something that, a sleep coach can walk you through. And, years ago, when I worked with parents of children, helping them sleep train their children, I would always say, that people would say, well, what do you need me for? And I said, a big part of what I did was normalize that journey, because people, if they just read it in a book and then their children would do something, they would say, oh, this can't be right. And they would stop and quit. Right. Yeah. And I never want somebody to put in the time or the money to do something. Like, you want to see it to the end and not quit. So having a sleep coach that's familiar, that's worked with a lot of people doing this kind of work, can tell you, I've seen this a million times, and just keep going and it's going to get better. And again, I think holding the person accountable is also really important, because it's like you said, all these sleep hygiene rules, but yet you're admitting that you don't really follow them.
No. And a lot while I'm breaking these rules that I've heard you tell me a million times, I have you in my head, Whitney, going, put down the phone, Claire. You're not supposed to be scrolling. You're not going to have a good night's sleep. So you're right. Sometimes it's that accountability. It's having to be able to report on it and also find what works. That's so important. And also, we were talking about, and I know your background too, having done this particularly with the children's books and some of the curriculum, the school curriculum that you created. It feels like to me that whole idea of sleep training for children, particularly babies, seems so much more the norm. If as your new parent, everyone's talking to you about, oh, what's your sleep routine and what are you doing? And there's advice from everybody about, how to help your baby get to sleep kind of stuff. And then, like I said, then we just think, oh, well, nothing to change here. But at every stage of life, I'm thinking about, again, my changing sleep habits and watching my daughter going through puberty and her sleep patterns changing. And it really is something we need to check in on throughout our lives. It's not just we'll wait till a problem arises, but we really need to think about sleep as that component of our health that we regularly check in on.
Yes, I think the most important thing is, and the world just changed now with it. I've seen, as we're watching the menopause world change and explode, I've seen this change in the sleep world. And the reason I wrote those children's books and the school curriculum is really to start getting children in the mindset of prioritizing sleep, so they don't grow up to be adults that have so many sleep problems. This has never been something that was taught in schools. And they teach physical education in schools and they teach about nutrition in school. They have to teach about sleep. It's a third pillar of health. And you're right. There's not a single person on this planet that doesn't sleep, right? You sleep every single day until your last day on Earth. If that's something you do every day, how can that not become a priority? Also with sleep, not only is it something you do every day, it literally affects everything else that you do from head to toe. There's not many things in life that have that kind of power. So why would we not spend the time and effort to perfect something or get it as good as we can that has such a powerful impact on everything else? And, going back to the menopause thing, I always say, and it's funny, not funny, it's a little ironic that, we, as women and many of us being mothers, we spend all those years, right, raising our families and maybe working, and maybe kids aren't sleeping well. And finally the kids grow, and when they're teenagers, we have to worry about them driving. I remember the first night both my kids got their, licenses, went out on their own. And then finally they're grown or they're out of the house. And you say, okay, now I could sleep. And
no.
Right? So that's not a funny joke. So now we just have to keep remembering that sleep is something that we're going to have to just keep working on, but it takes effort and it's worth the effort to fix.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think we take it for granted because, like you said, it is something that everybody does. We're supposed to just put your head down on a pillow or wherever you are, if you're blessed enough to have a pillow and a bed to sleep on. But it's not always that easy. And I think that's when maybe people start to feel bad about it. And, you're like, I don't want to talk about my sleep problems. I should be able to do this. But it is so normal that people have these problems with sleep, and particularly as we age. So if we don't talk about it, we're not going to get the sleep we need. And as you said, from head to toe, start of our lives to the end of our lives, sleep matters so much. So can you talk a little bit about why sleep is so important to our health? What are some of the things that sleep regulates in our body that keeps us healthy?
Mm-hmm, sure. So I like to think of it in like three areas: physical, emotional, and behavioral. That's a good way of thinking of it. It's really like it's this umbrella that overarches everything that we do, but you think of it as like mind, body, and behavior. So physically, of course, it protects us from short-term illness like colds and, maybe the flu, but also most long-term diseases such as heart attack, stroke, cancer, diabetes, right? Everything, all these long-term. So it's not just feeling good every day, it's protecting your future health physically. And then emotionally, I'm trained as a clinical and school psychologist, and so much of sleep is tied to our mental health. You'll very rarely meet somebody after a bad night of sleep that will wake up and say they don't feel more sad, lonely, depressed, anxious, stressed. So it affects our mental health. And most people with mental health issues do have struggles with sleep. It's kind of cyclical. And then last is behaviorally. So everything that we need to be successful at home, in our interpersonal relationships, at work, our kids at school, every one of those behaviors is affected by sleep. Your ability to focus, your efficiency, your productivity, your ability to work well with others, your frustration tolerance. All of those things can be positively affected by good sleep, but negatively affected by bad sleep. So why would we not want to give ourselves a boost in our success, our families, our significant others' success, when it's something that is generally something we have to do every day that can be free? We just have to make it a priority. And I know people have had sleep issues before electronics and phones, but it is, I mean, I work with teenagers often. When I ask them how many hours a day are you spending on social media from school until sleep, because they say, we don't have time to sleep. We're in school and then we have to study and we have sports. And like one of the kids will admit, oh, maybe 4 hours.
Right.
4 hours, right? On social media with it, that's getting your brain going. It's the blue lights going into your eyes. And I said, well, just try to cut it in half. Cut it down a half hour a day. See what happens. Like we can have more time to focus on relaxation and do all those things we need to do in a routine before bed if we really just put down the electronics and prioritize our own wellness, our health and wellness.
That is great advice. And I think, as you said, the way the world has changed so dramatically over the last decades really has thrown our what would be a natural cycle into chaos, because everything is, we even talk about the 24-hour news cycle now, right? That there's things are happening all the time. And then we add on the electronics that we can do. And then we add on the extra pressure and all of these different things that when you think about it, it's really not surprising that we're having these issues maybe more pronounced now. We think like, oh, my parents' generation or before that, they never talked about this. This wasn't an issue. It's not the same world. It's not the same world we're raising our children in now. Right. There's so many things. So I love being able to share this. Yeah.
You have to acknowledge that, but also acknowledge it's not going to change. I mean, I'm a realist. I'm not saying, don't be on your phones at all. But we also have to remember that we spend 90% of our time now inside.
Right.
So we have to focus really on our home environment. I always tell moms for your kids, life can get crazy. And next thing you know, you're all binging a Netflix show and then it's past everyone's bedtime. Set an alarm. You have to get, the lights down. Your lights inside should be mimicking your lights. Inside should be mimicking your lights outside. Turn on relaxing music. Like there's so many things we can do to set up the scene for healthy sleep and make everyone in your family want to commit to that sleep. But it's effort.
It takes effort. And I think that's it too, right? And it's habit. I think like any good, healthy thing, it's building those habits. Like you talked about those top 5 things that we should be doing and that we're not doing. But if we tried, Claire Gill, to do these things every day, then it would become habit and, a good habit. And so I am committing to this again and taking the advice that you've shared about what we need to do to kind of really set those things in motion for a good night's sleep. Because, oh my goodness, it is beyond blissful when it actually happens and you feel so energized and restored and wonderful. And I want to make sure everybody who's listening has those tools in place to bring that about. So really appreciate
people to write how they feel after a bad night of sleep. Keep in your sleep journal, and also record after a great night of sleep to remind yourself how amazing it is and how your day progresses after a bad night of sleep versus a good night of sleep, to give yourself the motivation to really commit to healthy sleep.
That's so amazing. Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I actually just thought of another question. Is there any difference in quality of sleep, or what do we know about when you dream or when you don't dream, and whether or not it's good sleep or bad sleep? Is there any correlation?
So most of our deep sleep happens in the first half of the night, and then our REM sleep predominantly happens later in the early morning hours. So you're finding that if you're not going to remember your dreams, if let's say you fall asleep, like what I hear from most people is they fall asleep easily and then they wake up, right? And can't get back to sleep. So there's a good chance you're not going to remember your dreams for that. So it has a lot to do with your sleep cycles and when you're going to sleep. And I know there's, a big trend now with sleep trackers, and I'm not anti-sleep trackers for most people, but if you have severe insomnia, it can become obsessive and maybe make it worse. So just depending on your sleep issues, how much you actually want to focus on that. And they're not completely reliable. So It might be something fun to do for an okay sleeper to see and maybe improve. But I wouldn't say put, all of your focus on the sleep trackers of today. And, then we can have another whole conversation, which maybe you and I will do another podcast together, but all about the quick fixes that everybody's looking for, right? All the melatonin people are taking, the sleep medications, the THC that people will, or the gummies they'll eat before. People just really don't want to put in the work and they want to. And there's not such great research on the effectiveness of those. Not really pro-sleep medication. Having said that, again, another full conversation we can have is on the hormone replacement therapy and the effectiveness for that with sleep. So, there are things that women can take now during the menopausal phase that can improve sleep.
Well, you've just set it up, Dr. Roban, because we do need a sleep series on this, right? Because there's so many things to cover and question. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing this basic strategy for everybody on how to build good sleep habits. And particularly as we go through midlife, I think sometimes just knowing, as you said to me, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person who has bad sleep habits, and that there are things we can do about it. So I invite you all to share this episode with your friends and family so that they too will learn about how to build good sleep habits at every stage of life. Thank you so much, Dr. Roban, again, for being here and sharing your expertise. We'll make sure that the resources about your work and your books are with the notes for this episode so our listeners can follow up and learn more. I hope everybody's enjoyed this episode as much as I have. As I said, please do share this with your family and friends and subscribe to the Positive Pause podcast so you never miss an episode. Thanks again to my guest, Dr. Whitney Roban, and thank you for listening. We hope you'll tune in to another episode of The Positive Pause.